done for. Everyone get out.
Greetings sailors and welcome to a somewhat delayed supporter spotlight. I've decided to do an all warships edition this time. We've had several all tanks editions, but I thought for a change let's have some boats, because I've had enough boats from my Patreon supporters that it seemed like a good way to get a couple out at once. I'm actually starting off with a clip of my own, and it's the mighty Tirpitz, and as you can see we had quite thoroughly won this game at this point. There's only 3 enemy ships left, and one of them is this North Carolina. Now initially I thought he was just coming closer to get a broadside, and my plan was to get close enough to torpedo him anyway, but I think he knew I had torpedoes. I think he was just trying to ram me, and it wasn't really apparent to me up until about this point when I start turning to try and get more of my guns on target and to get my torpedoes round, and he's turning in towards me. Yeah, he's trying to ram me, so let's turn a little bit more. He's getting a little bit close now, a little bit close. I don't want to get the torpedoes out there. I'd already had several nice Citadel hits on this guy, but there we go, that was his last 20k damage, and that was rather satisfying indeed. So there you go. Ram denial level Tirpitz. You may have seen the gif of that I put of that on Twitter already, but I thought the clip was fun enough to bear showing off. So anyway, on to the proper actual supporter games now. We're going to start off with this Minikaze game from Hildebrand, as you can see in a tier 6 game here, but it doesn't really matter. And I have to say, for especially the Japanese cruisers, being lower tier can actually be an advantage sometimes, because as you go up the tiers, your concealment ranges get worse. So even though you may have worse torpedo ranges, your ability to outspot other higher tier destroyers can be very, very useful indeed. So we've jumped a couple of minutes in, and this is his first encounter with the enemy. There's a Königsberg and a Cleveland a little bit further back, and there's also planes coming in this direction, so he's got to be wary of getting spotted by those. So he's going to put out some wide spreads to begin with. He's just sort of towards the edge of his torp range, and there we go, he's spotted from the air, so he's got to be quite careful. He already had a speed boost active, and he's popped smoke at this point because well, it's unfortunately got spotted from the air, but this carrier, well, I don't think if the carrier was actually trying to spot him. I think this was just sependirity, possibly serendipity for the enemy carrier. I can words. And in another bit of serendipity, one of Hildebrand's torps actually hits that Königsberg, so that takes off a big chunk of his health, and he's about to get torpedoed by their own carrier, and there we go, so he's down. At least I think that was their own carrier. Or was that a team kill? I don't know who got the kill there. Might have been another, it might have been the Aoba or somebody. I didn't actually see. It doesn't tell you in the messages, it just tells you the player names, and then you have to look at the player list and figure out who shot what where. Anyway, it must have been that Aoba, because it's only another cruiser that has a kill. So he's put more torpedoes out. There's a Cleveland advancing up here, and there is an Aoba coming over to this side, but between him and the friendly Zuiho, there's not a whole lot right now. So he's trying to, I think, screen this carrier and also provide spotting on this flank, because there is a Fuso a bit further back, and anything he spots will be within range of this Fuso. He just has to be wary about getting spotted by planes again. So he's turning around to re-engage at this point. I mean, he is going to have to worry about those planes coming back overhead at some point. In fact, they're actually starting their return journey right now. But meanwhile, it looks like that Cleveland's managed to run himself aground, and grounded targets are very, very, very tempting, tasty targets for torpedoes. But you have to be aware of the fact that, of course, once they run aground, they're immediately going to start backing up. So you have to adjust for that fact. And I'm not sure if Hildebrand quite does, but you can never quite predict. I mean, the way this guy's run aground, he's not run nose onto the island. He might have backed all the way off, or he might do what it looks like he has done, which is back a little way off and then start accelerating forwards again, and he's actually turning at the same time as well. So, although this was a nice spread of torps, it doesn't look like it's going to hit the Cleveland. And he actually has opened up with his guns at the same time. I don't know if that was the wisest move, But the Cleveland is right now focused on the Aoba instead. Although, as you can see, yes, the rate of fire on the Cleveland is such that he can quite easily get his next volley off with not that much of a delay at all. This is why Clevelands are especially dangerous to destroyers, because even if they might be focusing on something else, they can very, very rapidly turn their attention to you. So Hildebrandt's very wisely held fire and let himself be stealth, and he's going to get another spread of torpedoes out. There's a spotter plane from the Cleveland nearby, so he's got to be slightly careful about that. You don't get range markers on spotter planes, unfortunately. You do on the regular planes, but not on spotter planes, so you can't quite tell. You have to look at the minimap and kind of guesstimate if they're going to get close enough. Anyway, he did get lit up briefly by the spotter plane, but he's withdrawing once more. And, oh, that's lovely. Okay, there we go. Takes out the Cleveland with a nice broadside hit there. And the Cleveland knew he was there, but I think the Cleveland was also so focused on focusing the Aoba, yes, that he neglected to take the proper precautionary evasive maneuvers. Meanwhile, the next challenger has entered the fray. Yes, a Clemson. And in a one-on-one fight, you wouldn't necessarily want to get up close with a Clemson, because, of course, the turret turn time on American destroyers means they make very, very good dogfighters. Although, I have to say, at the higher tier, I've been told, and I think this is actually true, and oh, they just lost the Aoba, that's not so good, that the Japanese are, in terms of damage output, actually better in some ways, because the shell damage that the Japanese destroyers can do is the highest of all three nations. But the Americans still have the edge when it comes to fighting and manoeuvring hard and keeping their turrets on target. And the high-tier Soviet destroyers are actually pretty good at that as well. Not quite as good, but they're still pretty good. So that's unwelcome. There is actually, alongside that Clemson, another Minikaze. And the Fuso is still here, but the Fuso is also dealing with a pair of New Mexicos down south. And also manoeuvring to avoid airdrop torpedoes, and he's also going to be trying to make himself a hard target to hit for these destroyers as well. So Hildebrandt is, I mean, he's the focus of these guys, these pair of enemy destroyers, because he's basically spotting them for the Fuso. They want to make a run on the Fuso. This guy is alone and isolated, and they know the carrier is up here as well. But Hildebrandt is basically barring their way at the moment. So I think that's why they're focusing him first, and I think under the circumstances, when you've got a battleship and a carrier that you could be firing at, and there's a destroyer that's screening them, trying to take out that destroyer first is absolutely the right thing to do. So he's got 2 sets of destroyer guns turned on him here, and he has managed to set the Minikaze on fire. Or did he? Did somebody else set the Minikaze on fire? I'm not sure. I mean, bear in mind the Fuso is lobbing shots around the place as well. But either way, the Minikaze is falling back a little bit. But the Clemson's also keeping up that rate of fire from the side as well. And maybe the Clemson would be the better focus here. And as you can see, Hildebrandt thinking about turning his guns. I think he's just more manoeuvring at the moment. But that Clemson just has less health, basically. So therefore would be the priority. I think the Clemson also decided to make a run around Hildebrandt and try and get some torpedoes dropped on the carrier. But Hildebrandt heading in this direction anyway, and there's the other Minikaze, has put himself in a position to intercept. So he's going to put some torps out. I mean, there's very little chance that these will hit, but you never know. And oh, there's some torps from the Clemson. I mean, it's a wide spread, so he's got a good chance of getting through the gap, but that's awfully close. That's awfully close. Okay, everybody can breathe again. Oh, good lord. Okay, Hildebrandt. Okay, well, I think your crew are going to need new trousers after that. That was interesting. Now, the bad news is his engine's out, but the good news is that Clemson just died, so he doesn't have to worry about more torps. But I think, and you can see in the chat in a second, that Hildebrandt says, oh dear, I'm out. Because he's dead in the water, his smoke is down, and his repair is another 20 seconds away. He doesn't have speed boost. He's basically a sitting duck for this Minikaze. But he's not the only person shooting at the Minikaze. Now, unfortunately, the carrier died. I think it was the Clemson. Not sure. wasn't actually paying attention. I was too busy clenching, and you know, the edge of my seat. That's where I was clenching. Yes. But yeah, the carrier dying is a bit unfortunate. But in terms of the actual team situation, I mean, they are ahead on points, and oh, there's more torpedoes. Now he's just gotten his repair back, and what timing? What timing? Okay, so we can safely avoid both these torps. But yeah, in terms of the team situation, they are ahead on points, and they are just ahead on ships. But the enemy team still has air cover, unfortunately. So there we go. That was the remainder of the Minikaze spread. So the Minikaze is now very firmly on reload, and it's just a question of can he get the kill. He actually has now more health than this guy. And nope, there we go. That I think was the Furutaka that got that kill. Not sure. Don't think it was the Fuso. So no kills apart from that Cleveland. No further kills, I should say. But all in all, that was a pretty good defense of both his Fuso and, well, attempted defense of the carrier, but unfortunately he wasn't able to. So we've skipped ahead quite a ways here. I mean, this was just heading down the map. The enemy team were down to the last couple of ships, and the last kind of really healthy ship is this New Mexico. So this is the one that Hildebrand's going to go for. The remaining Mutsuki and enemy Zuiho are also down here, but they're much further over to the west. There's a Farragut engaging them. There's a Nuremberg coming down. The New Mexico, Fuso, New York are all heading down as well. I'm not sure that Hildebrand was actually trying to cap here. He might have been in the cap to try and force the New Mexico to come forwards to engage, although at this stage of a battle, looking at the team list, well, it's not hopelessly lost, but the fact that there's 3 enemy battleships versus 1 is not, you know, it's not good odds, shall we say. Meanwhile, the Farragut has died, but the Nuremberg is now within range, so that carrier is more concentrated on defending himself, so Hildebrand really doesn't have to worry about being air spotted at this point. And New Mexico's just pulled into spotting range though, so air spotting or no, he's got to be careful here. So he pops his remaining smoke. Now, the problem with getting this close and putting out torps is that... oh, okay. Well, it was 1 overpen, but still that's 1,000 less health. Is that they're going to know that you're coming, and they're going to know that you've put torpedoes out. But one of these might hit, maybe 2. And he does actually get 2 hits. So, despite having warning that there was a destroyer nearby, he wasn't able to take sufficient evasive action, or he just didn't react fast enough. So there's another 2 torps out, and I mean, this guy, he knows Hildebrand is here now. I mean, he avoided most of that previous spread, but still took 2, and he's down to half health now. So he's got no excuse for not knowing there's a destroyer nearby. But to be fair to this New Mexico captain, he's also got the enemy New Mexico, well, from his point of view, enemy New Mexico, and New York to deal with as well. So he can't just turn broadside, although turning broadside is the wrong thing to do when there's torpedoes in the water anyway. But yeah, Hildebrand's had another hit, and oh, that looked like it was a very close miss. So yeah, he's got a little bit of time left to maybe kill this guy, but we're down to the last 20 seconds of the match now. This actually went to the full 20 minutes. And oh, it looks like he took some hits. He's very, very low health, 41 hit points, and it looks like he flooded out. So there we go. And that was the last kill. So that destroyer and that carrier do actually get away, but they've ended the 20-minute mark with having more points with than the enemy team, and therefore have won. So that was actually a rather nice result there. And it wasn't, I mean, there weren't any kind of like truly spectacular moments, although that torpedo earlier that almost ended him, almost, that was slightly a brown trouser moment. But yeah, all in all, that was a pretty good game, and 1300 base XP, top of the team. Yeah, I think that was a pretty deserved result, and the Minikaze is a nice little ship, and you can do stuff like that and have even better games than that. But you know, this is one a viewer sent me, a supporter sent me, so this is what we've seen. Wow, such high praise for that game, eh? Anyway, I thought it was a good Minikaze game though. So next up we have Yachty, and we've seen warship games from Yachty before, but this is the first time we've seen him in a battleship, and it's one of the slower ones in the game. It's the Tier 6 American New Mexico. and it's got a pretty good reputation. I think it has as many guns as the Fuso. I think in terms of firepower, the Fuso is probably better, but in terms of armour, in terms of toughness, I think you would take the New Mexico. So that makes angling especially important, and actually that's what he's doing right now against this enemy Fuso. He fires off and he tucks his front back in, so he actually bounces a whole bunch of those shells and manages to get a nice cluster of hits on that Fuso in the process. Now, that wasn't the first damage he'd done in this game. We had skipped ahead a bit, but that was his first big, significant chunk of damage. And that's why angling matters, even in the Japanese battleships, but most especially in the Americans with their better armour, because he was able to come very nicely out of that trade indeed. While this broadside sailing Fuso, well, he's basically doomed. So there we go, another volley of shots out. He's still broadside, another 2 Citadel hits, and there's Yachty's first kill. Now he's actually squadded up with another New Mexico and a Fuso. So this is a pretty heavyweight division right here, 3 battleships. So what they do, all 3 of them, and how they kind of divide their attentions and what they fire at and where they go is going to have quite a big impact on the match, because they are top tier and there's also no carriers for them to worry about, so that makes for a little bit more of a comfortable situation, especially in a slower battleship. So they're just continuing to take apart the ships in this corner. I mean, the Fuso was the biggest threat, but there's still a bunch of cruisers around. There are also some destroyers on the enemy team, but the one that we can see that's on this flank, I mean, there's an Yaslav that's coming over here, and a Mutsuki. The Mutsuki's really the only one they have to worry about, and he seems to be right over, or was last spotted right over on the 1 line, so not an immediate threat, but they can't be too complacent here. The Yaslav, meanwhile, has, like, 4-kilometer torpedoes. It's actually better than the tiers 5, 6 and 7, but still it's not a particularly fast ship, so if that tries to get close enough to make a torp drop, they will see it coming. So at this point Yachty actually starts making a turn round, because this team has kind of split north and south. There's a bunch of ships in the south. There's what is that, Königsberg, a pair of Königsbergs and a Nicholas that are pressing down the south flank, and well, they've taken out the Fuso, which was the biggest threat on the north flank, but it looks like there's some ships that are actually retreating, that are going south. So instead of chasing them in a slow battleship, well, the New Mexico and the Fuso that are in his division are still kind of continuing along this way. But Yachty's taken the decision to start turning back now, basically, to provide some support for the middle. Now, this has some risks. I mean, battleships are pretty tough, but being in a lone battleship, if a destroyer gets the jump on you, then that can be pretty bad news. So we've skipped on a little bit. The last thing that he has got in range to shoot out of the enemy cruisers is this Ioba, and there we go, a nice group of hits. But having said what I was saying about destroyers sneaking up on you, that is exactly what the enemy Yaslav is trying to do. Now remember, 4-kilometer torpedoes, and the turret turn time on the New Mexico is not great. So this guy is already within torpedo range, and as you can see, Yachty's secondaries have opened up, but both fore and aft, the secondaries aren't that great. However, his reload is about to come back up. The guy turns to make the drop, but boom, even though it's AP shells, he can get enough of those AP shells out that was enough. Even though those will all have been over penetrations, he was just able to have enough hits that the overpens did the job. And it looks like, very fortunately, the guy did not get his torpedoes off. So that shell reload coming back on his forward guns was very, very well timed indeed. And it was a little bit lucky, actually. I mean, if he paid attention to the minimap a bit sooner, he may have held his shots against that Ioba that he killed, and might have turned his guns on the Yaslav instead. Although if he'd fired at the guy at longer ranges when he was still bow on, he would have had a much less good chance of actually taking him out. So although it wasn't, I don't think, intentional that he waited for that destroyer to make the turn and show his broadside and therefore become an easier target. It kind of fortuitously worked out that that was his best chance of killing him, and that's exactly, you know, at that moment is when his shells came back. So it was very bad news for that Aslain, but very good news for Yachty, who still has almost all of his hit points. He hasn't had to use a single repair yet. He has, however, popped his first spotter plane, so that gives him some more range. He's trying for some long-range shots on this, both this Congo and Cleveland. Although, I mean, for a Japanese battleship, sort of tier 5 upwards, this would just be, I mean, the extreme range, but this would be within the normal range. You wouldn't have to pop a spotter plane out in order to get that extra range. But in this case, because it's an American battleship and they have shorter ranges, yeah, he really does have to. So we've skipped on ahead a little bit again. He's trying to take out this very low health Karlsruhe, and he's not done a lot of full volleys. He has actually done a lot of spread volleys, and it's actually worked out reasonably well. So there's another kill. That's quite useful. Very low health, but it's one less ship on the enemy team. This battle's actually a lot closer than the previous one. They lost their Fuso division mate, but his remaining New Mexico division mate is coming down from the north. I think he spent a long time in that corner, and of course the New Mexico's not very fast, so you have to be really paying attention to the minimap in terms of trying to stay ahead of what the enemy team is doing. And having mods, as you can see here on the replay. I mean, I don't know if Yachty actually uses mods. Oh, that's a nice pen. I don't know if Yachty uses this mod, but that is pretty useful information in terms of determining where you want to go next in an American battleship. So the enemy team have got a Cleveland, Congo, and yes, a Minikaze, and he's just found the Minikaze, and he's very, very, very close range indeed. So this is not so good. Now the Minikaze has put torps out, and Yachty very wisely killed his speed, so he was able to, without really having to turn there, I mean he didn't have to panic too much, he was able to just quite easily and neatly avoid all of those. It wasn't too hairy. But at this point I would have switched to HE shells personally. Having fired that AP volley at the Cleveland, I would have switched to HE, because the thing you're going to be dealing with most immediately is a Minikaze. And it's also a little bit disadvantageous in that he's got to go through these islands. Now he could make a turn here, but unless he makes a turn and starts going north, just his position in the map right now, generally the Minikaze can easily use these islands against him. So there's not really any good way of dealing with that, unfortunately. Now the Minikaze actually has done the smart thing and popped out behind him. He's not just playing around in front of him. And, oh, this is going to be nasty. Now, some of these may hit. The first 4 are going to miss, but, oh, again, a very, very close miss. It matters less. I mean, that really close miss in Hildebrandt's game would have killed him if it had hit, but as you can see, Yachty is still fairly high health at this point. And it's still, I would have turned my attention. I mean, I know that the low health Congo's there, and he's going to kill that low health Congo. But I would have turned my attention to the Minikaze a bit soon, because this has given the Minikaze time to reload. And still he has AP shell, so yeah, I would have gone for HE. And this is going to be a lot more painful because the guy can't miss at this range. Now this is not broadside, he's managed to avoid 2 torps, he's eaten 2 and he's about to eat his final 2, and that is most of his health gone. He's also on fire at the moment, so he pops his repair party and he pops his damage control party. And at this stage, well, unless he kills this Minikaze pretty quick, and he's also got fire support from the foot attacker that's come in from the west. He was in danger there, but even if the Minikaze had killed him, the foot attacker almost certainly would have killed the Minikaze. So that was a bit of a, I think, a desperation move from the Minikaze. I mean, it was a good use of the terrain he had available on using the islands to pop out and take advantage of the fact that Yachty was firing at other targets. But the fact that Yachty was able to dodge 2 of that final salvo was enough to keep him alive. So it's now down to just this this Cleveland. And this guy, well, we've skipped ahead a little bit to this very final volley because this guy was just trying to keep his distance, but he goes onto the line, and that makes lining up the range of the shots quite easy, and there we go. I don't have scores for that, unfortunately, and I had to pause, I had to stop recording just before the final kill. I've had some fun with display drivers over the last couple of days, so my usual recording method of doing screen recording hasn't worked. I've had to do client recording instead. So, yeah, it just was a bit wonky all round. So lastly, we come to a ranked battle. This is Andy CX. I think this might be the first Warships replay we've had from him. And he's in the Fujin, which is pretty much a premium minikaze. This is one that was available during Halloween. He's actually got Halloween paint on it, as, of course, Yachty did as well on his New Mexico. So, yes, it's well known that if you make your ship look like a pumpkin, that no one will be able to see it. Yes. So they have lost a ship already. I mean, we're a couple of minutes into this game. Basically, it's kind of like team battles in World of Tanks. You need to stick together. You need to focus fire. And they had a cruiser that just went up north on his own. Was the only thing the enemy team could shoot at. They were all sticking together, and they focused him, and he died. So it's imperative, especially in the cruisers and the battleships, to stick together. Now, the Bogue is also, I skipped on a little bit, I mean, that was the initial engagement. He's actually trying to get round to where he knows the enemy carrier is, but their carrier is in trouble as well, because the Bogue just kind of puttered south a bit and then sat there for a little while. And we're at the 12-minute mark now, and the Bogue really hasn't moved very far from his initial spawn. So with the speed of the Bogue, especially in this kind of game mode, he really should have set course west a long time before he did. So he's in trouble, but the enemy Bogue is in trouble as well. So, I mean, if both teams lose their carriers at the same time, I guess it's an even trade, but the enemy team still hasn't lost any ships yet. And in the meantime, we've lost another cruiser, so that's not so good. So having said, it's important to stick together. I mean, the destroyers, I think, have the most range of action, and especially when it's ocean. Not only are you acting as a scout, but you can get round behind enemies and drop torpedoes and just generally be a pain in the ass. And I'm not actually sure if this Königsberg is... if Andy... I mean, they kind of knew he was coming up round here. He got spotted by that enemy destroyer earlier. I'm not sure if this Königsberg was coming for him specifically to try and protect their carrier, or if it was just, I'm going to go over here for some reason. I don't know, but for whatever reason, he's there. The New Mexico, New York is also there as well, but it's not... I mean, he's got a good... what's the word I'm looking for? He's got a good opportunity to go after this Bogue, this enemy Bogue, but it's not entirely risk-free because, of course, if he fires his guns, if he gets spotted, if he kills the Bogue, they're going to know he's there. And if he starts firing, obviously they're going to know he's there because he's going to get spotted. But it might be that he just had in mind that they really needed to kill some enemies, and they just lost another ship. They've just lost their carrier. So I think it was that... they've lost half their team. I think it was that idea that they really they need to start killing stuff on the enemy team that kind of forced his hand and made him think, right, okay, I'm going to actually start opening fire. He is within torpedo range, and I'm not quite sure why he didn't decide to use his torpedoes and instead just went straight for the guns. I don't know. I mean, he could have put torps in the water. It may be he decided he was going to keep torpedoes for the Königsberg. I don't know. And obviously he's now being fired on by the Königsberg, so he's got to be a little bit careful here. Now, I don't know the stats of the Fujin. It might have some stuff that does better than the minikaze. There's almost certainly some stuff that it does worse than the minikaze, because they tend to balance premium ships that are similar to existing ships in that way. And for a while, you could say the Murmansk was unquestionably better than the Omaha, but the Omaha, with the top hull these days, has... you know, it's got at least one thing that it does better than the Murmansk. Anyway, there we go. It does finally put some torps out. That finishes off the aircraft carrier. That is a pretty useful kill. Actually, his team, in the meanwhile, have managed to kill both the New York and the Königsberg, so that was also useful. They had split off from their team, and so things are a lot more even now. It's 4 versus 4. Both sides have lost their carriers. The enemy team is trying to cap A with Mutsuki, but Mutsuki's just died, so that's fine. The enemy team just lost their kind of sneaky scout, and Andy is now in an excellent position to go and cap. Now, we've skipped on a little bit ahead here. They've actually lost another ship. I think one of the Nürnbergs. And, and there goes the remaining cruiser. So it's now just Andy and this New Mexico. The enemy team have got a Fuso and a Cleveland. So this is close. This is really close. And look at the victory points. They're both capping, so neither side is getting points at the moment. And there we go, Andy's managed to cap. The New Mexico was resetting, so they've just now pulled even on points. In fact, they're very slightly ahead on points. The New Mexico is coming north, and Andy is basically trying to get closer so he can start dropping torpedoes. And this is a very good time to be in a destroyer. This is an excellent time to be in a destroyer when the enemy team has lost all their destroyers. He can make torpedo drops all day long, but if they lose the New Mexico, that could be problematic because the enemy team will get points. And they're on a knife edge right now. Look at that point counter. They are just ahead. Just ahead. If the battle ended right now, well, it would depend exactly at what second it ended, because the enemy team is just pulling up even on points. But they're because Andy was able to cap first, they're just... Oh, it's on a knife edge. It's just on a knife edge is what I'm trying to say in my usual ham-fisted way. Anyway, he's pulled into range of the Fuso, puts out a full salvo of torps, and the Fuso, well, if he's got his Captain's Sixth Sense thing going, he will probably assume it's from the New Mexico. And this is why in a destroyer, it's... good to stay around your allies a lot of the time. I mean, you can go on your own and try and use your excellent battlefield mobility to it might be good. It might be good. No! Oh, they just ran out of range. I think the New Mexico turned out of those. He turned away. Yeah, it's tempting to do that, and sometimes you can get those opportunities. But if somebody is in a ship and their Sixth Sense goes off and there are no enemies around in sight, they are almost certainly going to go, oh ho, there's a destroyer nearby. Well, if they're smart, they will, anyway. Whereas if you're nearby allied ships, then you basically, the enemy team don't have that kind of warning that you're there unless you're actually spotted. So unfortunately, the New Mexico has gone down, and this Fuso is very, very healthy indeed. So he is going to need basically either a detonation or a full salvo of torpedoes to kill this guy. And he's already made one drop, and the Fuso has already dodged one drop, so he's got to be fairly careful. Now, the Cleveland's just popped into render. He's very low health. A single torp would do it. You maybe could take him down with guns with a faster firing destroyer, but it would be hellishly risky against a Cleveland. You could pop smoke and do it maybe if you had one of the American destroyers, but for the Fujin it probably isn't that possible. Anyway, he spreads this this salvo of torps a bit more widely. 2 of them might go in. I mean, it looks like most of them are going to miss, but we'll see in a second if this is actually going to do anything. And one hit. Okay, well, that's a start. So the guy, I mean, he was full health. He's going to have a repair available. He's going to have his damage control available, so he's not really going to have any flooding damage out of this. Although, having said he's got repairs available, doesn't look like he is repairing. I mean, he must surely have repairs available if he was full health, but anyway, maybe he repaired to full health already? I don't know, I've never seen anyone quite manage to fully repair to full health, but anyhow. Now, Andy has ventured a little bit too close, and that's bad, but he had smoke available, so he was able to pop it and make a safe retreat with not losing too much health in the meantime. But despite the New Mexico, the Fuso rather, having complete warning that time that he just made a drop, Andy still got another hit. We're also down to the last 2 minutes just about of this battle, so this is absolutely on a knife edge. Given the points situation, if he can kill this Fuso, that might be enough points, maybe. But basically, this entire game now rests on him. And again, he's close enough to be spotted, so the Fuso could turn into these and would have a pretty decent chance of avoiding them, maybe. But he's actually turning away. And a lot of the time, you want to try and turn in because, well, it depends on the relative angles, but turning in is usually better than trying to turn away. But in this case, yeah, no, 3 hits, there we go. In this case, even though, again, the Fuso had complete and total warning that he was going to make that drop, that was, there we go, that was enough to make the kill. Also, we've skipped ahead to the last bit. He was trying to cap, but the fact that he was even trying to cap meant that the enemy wasn't getting any points from that that cap circle they held even. So they were able to, at that point, having killed the Fuso, get ahead on their victory points, and basically Andy secured that win fairly hard there, and that is, I think, fairly well represented from the results. Top of the team, 1800 base XP. I mean, that obviously would have put him ahead with it being a ranked battle and all, and also I think he just had to be pretty pleased with himself for that carry, because that was a very nice carry indeed. So there we go, 60k damage almost from torpedo hits. He also did nearly 16k from HE shells against the carrier, nearly 18k from flooding, so that was pretty good. In fact, the Fuso would have been flooding at the end there as well. And I just put on the credit screen there because, of course, the Fujin is a premium ship. So you can see that it was a pretty profitable battle as well. Almost 300,000 credits for a Tier 5 destroyer. Pretty good. So there we go. I think the next one, I mean, I managed to get myself a week out with this, and I didn't mean to, but the next one will probably be tanks, or maybe a mixed one with tanks and ships. But I just thought it'd make an interesting change to do an all warships one, and I realise less people will watch it, but you know, this series is all about the supporters, and a whole bunch of my supporters are playing warships, so here's some of what they've been up to. So if you've enjoyed this batch of replays, you can hit the like button, you can leave any comments below, you can subscribe to my channel, and as always, stay tuned for more.